In a forgotten corner of the Ottoman Empire, where fathers traded daughters like wheat and a girl's silence was more valuable than her dreams, I was sold. Not for love. Not for choice. But for land. Everyone told me what to expect on my wedding night: obedience, surrender, silence. But instead, he did the unthinkable. Before we begin, tell me where in the world you're listening from. Do you believe love can be born from chains? Do you believe that dignity can survive in silence? Make yourself comfortable. Let me take you back to a time when one man's choice, and one woman's defiance, changed everything. Anatolia, 1832, the Ottoman province of Bayhan, a place where land was currency and daughters were collateral. The wind that blew down from the Bayhan mountains didn't just carry the dust of old wars. It carried names forgotten, vows broken, and the scent of dry wheat fields that had not yielded crops in years. Inside a dimly lit chamber, a man with tired eyes and calloused hands signed a document with a trembling pen. Across the room, his daughter sat still, her posture upright, face unreadable. Her name was Safiye. She was 17. Old enough to be married, too young to understand the betrayal that came in the shape of a signature. She didn't flinch when her father said the words. Prince Kamal Daran has agreed to grant us the eastern plots in exchange for your hand. Her eyes didn't water. Her voice didn't shake. Something in her had already detached. Her mother stood by the door, silent, face pale. When her husband left the room, she crossed it and held Safiye's face in trembling hands. She didn't say goodbye. She only whispered a blessing. A blessing that tasted like a final breath. The next morning, Safiye was taken from her home in a closed carriage, flanked by 2 armed escorts. She wore no jewelry. Just a sky-blue scarf tied tightly under her chin and a plain cotton dress. Her wrists were bare, but her spine remained unbent. The palace of Bayhan rose in the distance like a stone mirage. Its copper domes and alabaster columns glowed beneath the harsh sun. No fanfare greeted her arrival. No servants bowed. No one smiled. 2 women in gray waited at the entrance. One pulled off her veil roughly, as if reminding her she no longer owned herself. Her body now belonged to the empire. Her name, to a man she'd never met. A soft voice, coated in venom, whispered from behind her. So this is the new wife. Safiye turned. A woman with crimson lips and piercing eyes stood draped in embroidered silk. Lael, they called her. The favorite. The one everyone thought the prince would marry. He usually takes longer to choose, Lael added with a bitter smile. You must have been convenient. She walked away without waiting for a response. Safiye didn't respond. She didn't lower her gaze. In a world built on silence, she had learned that silence could be a shield. By nightfall, she was led to her chambers. Alone. No music played. No footsteps echoed behind her. And still, she could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching, judging, calculating. She sat before a mirror, her reflection unfamiliar. The scarf had been taken. Her hair unbraided. Her eyes, dark and determined, stared back like a challenge. When the door opened, she did not stand. And when Prince Kamal Daran stepped inside, the man who now owned her name, her future, her fate, she did not bow. And that's when something unthinkable happened. He didn't come toward her. Not immediately. He stood near the door, his gaze measured, silent, as if weighing whether to step forward or walk away. Safiye didn't speak. She didn't move. She was not afraid, not exactly, but she was bracing. Bracing for the moment her life would no longer be her own. Then he said it. Quietly. Without ceremony. I have no intention of forcing anything upon you tonight, or ever. This room is yours. Your space. Your decision. She blinked, unsure she'd heard him right. He continued, this marriage was arranged by others, not by us. I did not choose this union, and I know you didn't either. So I will not pretend this is something it is not. She studied him. He was not cruel looking. His eyes were dark, tired, not unlike her father's, but heavier, burdened. What do they expect of me? She asked at last. He answered without hesitation, they expect a quiet wife. A loyal wife. A woman who obeys. But I expect none of those things if they do not come freely. There was silence. A long stretch of it. Then he bowed slightly, not as a husband, not as a prince, but as a man who knew the difference between possession and presence. No one will enter this room without your permission. Not even me. He turned and walked out. And Safiye remained seated. Awake all night. Not because she feared him. But because, for the first time in her life, she feared her own confusion more. The next morning came dressed in cold light. The marble floors outside her door echoed with soft footfalls and the clipped commands of women who ruled the harem wing with silken fists. Safiye rose from the bedding untouched, her hair a river of dark waves, her eyes hollow with a question that hadn't yet formed. A knock, soft, then firmer. The door creaked open and in walked a tall woman in a dark tunic, her belt heavy with iron keys. Her face was carved from stillness. This was Name Hatton, the senior harem steward. Your bath is drawn, she said. You'll find fresh garments laid out. The prince has issued no other instructions. Safiye nodded once. She made no move to follow. Name didn't wait for obedience. She left without a word. In the steam-filled chamber, she bathed without assistance. The fabrics prepared for her were embroidered silks, delicate and expensive. She chose none. Instead, she wore the same cotton dress she arrived in. The palace was alive with whispers. Behind every curtain, every archway, there was a rustle of curiosity. The prince's new wife had not been touched. Had not cried. Had not fainted. Had not asked for anything. In the harem, Lael whispered sweet poison into the ears of the other women. She's only here because of her father's debts. She's not noble. She's nothing more than a clever peasant girl with good posture. Servants repeated it under their breath. The quiet wife. The ghost bride. Safiye ignored them all. She took her meals alone. She walked the garden paths in silence. She kept her head high, not in arrogance, but in refusal. And somewhere behind carved wooden screens and latticed balconies, Prince Kamal Daran watched her. He did not summon her. Did not send her gifts. But he watched. And she knew it. The days passed in slow procession. Safiye remained untouched, unmoved, but not unseen. The harem's women grew restless, Lael most of all. Her whispers turned sharper. Her smiles, thinner. She thinks silence is power, Lael said one evening, reclining on embroidered cushions, surrounded by her chosen confidants. But silence only protects those who have something to hide. No one dared speak openly against her, but one of the younger servants, Miran, had begun to notice the shift in the air. That afternoon, Safiye returned from the garden to find something left on the table, a silver hairpin set with mother-of-pearl. It was simple, elegant, clearly valuable. There was no note, no explanation. She didn't touch it. When Name arrived for evening inspection, Safiye pointed to it and asked, "Do you know who left this?" Name shook her head slowly. "No one gives a gift in this palace without reason." "I don't accept gifts from men who don't speak," Safiye replied flatly. Name's eyes narrowed, studying her, then the pin. "Then leave it where it can be seen. So that silence answers silence." But not all silence was harmless. 3 days later, Safiye drank her tea at dawn and immediately felt something wrong. A bloom of heat in her chest. A strange metallic taste. Her vision blurred. Her knees buckled. She collapsed beside the divan, gasping. Name was the first to find her. She didn't call for servants. She went straight to the prince. Prince Kamal burst into the room moments later, unguarded, unmasked. One look at Safiye's pale face, and he lifted her into his arms like she was made of breath and bone. He carried her through the palace halls in silence, ignoring the whispers, the startled gazes. No one dared stop him. In his private chambers, he laid her gently on the bed, ordered cold cloths and a physician, and sat beside her for hours. Watching. Waiting. He didn't speak. He didn't touch her again. But when she finally opened her eyes, he was still there. And something had changed. Safiye's recovery was slow. She never asked what had been done to her. She didn't have to. But her silence changed flavor. Less guarded, more curious. She wandered farther through the palace, tracing the same marble corridors each day, until one afternoon she discovered an arched door left ajar. A faint scent drifted out, papyrus, leather, and ink. Inside was the library. The room was tall and quiet, its shelves rising like temple columns. Dust floated in slanted light. No servants. No whispers. Just the hush of forgotten stories. She walked the aisles with reverence. Her fingers brushed bindings stitched in Arabic, Persian, and Ottoman Turkish. Histories. Poetry. Law. Philosophy. And tucked behind a stack of ledgers, she found a box. Not ornate, just cedar and worn, with a simple clasp. Inside were letters, some sealed, others unguarded. Some were signed with imperial crests. Others were unsigned, but all were penned in the same precise hand. Prince Kamal's. One was a letter from a court official urging his removal from command during a past campaign. He refuses to follow orders. He hesitates where action is needed. His sentiment clouds judgment. Another was a personal confession. No greeting. No farewell. Only ink and ache. They ordered me to set fire to that village. They said it would serve as a warning. But I saw children. I saw elders. I saw no enemy. So I refused. And they sent me here. Safiye read it twice. Then again. The coldness in him suddenly had warmth. His silence, a wound. She closed the box gently, as if not to disturb his ghosts. That evening, she passed his chambers and paused. She didn't knock. Didn't speak. But she left a single almond blossom at his door. He never mentioned it. But the next morning, the silver hairpin she had once rejected was returned. Not on her table. But beside her tea. Wrapped in linen. And this time, she did not throw it away. The wind shifted the morning he arrived. Safiye sensed it before she saw him. The stiff gait of a man used to controlling rooms he no longer owned, the scent of travel clinging to his coat. Her father stood at the palace gates, not with affection in his eyes, but with calculation. He brought papers, sealed with a merchant's mark. He asked to speak with the prince. Not with his daughter. But Safiye came anyway. They met in the smaller audience chamber. Kamal sat upright, flanked by two advisors. Safiye entered without being summoned and stood beside him without asking. Her father blinked, hesitated, but continued. I bring a proposal. I believe your highness will find it practical. I have another daughter, Aysen. Younger. Sweeter. She would serve well in your household, perhaps as a handmaiden. In return, I ask for the southern grazing fields of Karkaya. Silence blanketed the room. Even the guards stopped breathing. Safiye stepped forward. Her voice was calm. But her fury rippled beneath it. You would trade her too? She's better off here than in the ruin we live in, he said, lifting his chin. You are cared for. Federal clothed. No harm has come to you. No harm, she echoed. Only silence. Only sail. Prince Kamal rose. His voice didn't rise with him. It remained even. Grave. This palace is not a market. And your daughters are not currency. There will be no further trades. Her father sputtered, surprised. But. Kamal stepped forward. Leave. And do not return. The older man looked at his daughter for the first time. She didn't flinch. He left. And the door closed behind him with the finality of a chapter ending. Safiye stood still, heart thundering in her chest. She felt the prince's gaze, steady, unwavering. You didn't need to defend me, she said. I didn't, he replied. I defended what no one else had the courage to protect. The palace slept in hushed murmurs that night, but shadows moved with purpose. Lael had waited. She watched the slow change. The prince's glances, the shift in courtly rumor, the way Safiye walked now without shrinking. She couldn't bear it. She crossed the corridors like silk, quiet and rehearsed. Her perfume announced her presence before her steps did. When she saw him, she let her silk handkerchief fall. Prince Kamal turned the corner, and there she was, bent gracefully, her hands lingering as she retrieved the fabric. My prince, she purred. Some nights were never meant to be spent alone. He said nothing. He moved to walk past. She stepped in his path. And then she kissed him. Not out of love. Not out of hope. Out of possession. What she didn't see was the figure standing in the shadows beyond the arches. Safiye. She had only meant to walk. To clear her thoughts. To feel the quiet. But she saw it. The moment. The lips. The stillness. She didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. She didn't turn and run. She simply watched for one beat longer. Then turned. Walked away. And closed her chamber door without a sound. That night, she didn't cry. She didn't speak. But something inside her, something tender, folded inward. Not in surrender. In preservation. The next morning arrived cloaked in silence, thicker than any before. The air in Safiye's chamber was heavy, but not from the night's chill. It was from what she hadn't said. A book lay waiting on her table, one she hadn't taken from the library. Tucked inside its pages was a slip of parchment, folded once. No seal. No scent. No signature. Just a single line. Protect the prince. Someone plans to poison him. At first, she thought it was a joke. Another cruelty planted by those who wanted her gone. But something about the handwriting, hurried, masculine, familiar, made her pause. She reread it. 3 times. Her heartbeat matched every word. If it was false, it would ruin her. If it was true, and she stayed silent, it would ruin more than her. By twilight, she walked to the prince's quarters. Alone. Her shawl wrapped tightly, her steps soundless. The guards looked at her with quiet surprise, but no one stopped her. Wordlessly, one of them announced her presence. Kamal opened the door himself. He wore no armor of title, just a robe, simple and unadorned. He looked at her as though he hadn't expected to see her again. Not so soon. Not like this. I need to speak with you, she said, voice steady. She held out the parchment. He read it once. Folded it. Slipped it into his sleeve. Did you write this? She shook her head. It was left for me. Do you know who? No, a pause. But I know who it's about. He nodded once. Said nothing more. Then, after a long silence, there is a dinner tomorrow night. With the council. I'd like you to be there. She studied him. He wasn't asking. But he wasn't commanding either. And for the first time, she didn't answer with words. She nodded. The council dinner arrived cloaked in tension. The main hall of the palace shimmered with quiet ceremony. Long carpets. Gilded candle holders. Silver dishes arranged with care. Councilmen entered in pairs. Low-ranking wives flanked the walls like decorations. But tonight, there was one new presence. Safiye. She wore no crown. No jewels. But the green of her Antari was deep, dignified. Her hair braided simply. Her eyes steady. Prince Kamal greeted no one with more warmth than required. He watched every hand. Every glance. The food came in courses: lamb with rosemary, rice with saffron, honeyed apricots. And then, the tea. A servant placed small porcelain cups before each guest. Steam curled upward. Fragrant. Familiar. When the final cup reached Lael, the prince raised his hand. Tonight, he said evenly, I would like to offer a toast. The room fell quiet. To peace in this palace. And to truth, when it is hardest to speak. He looked directly at Lael. Would you honor us by drinking first? She blinked. Smiled. Then paused. Of course. She lifted the cup, but didn't drink. I hesitate, she said lightly, only because I'm not used to being singled out. But you're used to being listened to, Safiye said from across the table. The room went still. Lael's smile faltered. Is there an accusation? She asked. No, Prince Kamal answered. There is only a question. He stood. This palace has been poisoned. Not only by tea, but by rumor. By envy. By silent hatred masquerading as friendship. Then to the guards, escort Lael to her quarters. She is confined there until a full investigation is made. Lael's protest rose like steam, angry, indignant, but it was ignored. As she was taken away, her eyes found Safiye. She didn't scream. She didn't threaten. She only glared with the fury of a woman who had lost her game. When the doors closed, Safiye looked down at her tea. It remained untouched. And for the first time, she drank. That night, the palace exhaled. Like lungs unclenched. But fire, real fire, doesn't always announce itself with smoke. Safiye walked the gardens just before dawn, her fingers trailing along the cold stone balustrades. She felt something she hadn't known in months. Stillness that wasn't fear. And that's when the scream rang out. A servant. Then another. The bell tower chimed with chaos. She ran. Through halls. Down staircases. Until she reached the inner court. Flames. An entire wing of the palace was burning. Not a kitchen accident. Not a candle left too long. This was deliberate. The harem wing. Safiye's feet froze. Smoke clawed up the sky like curses made visible. Guards rushed past her, buckets in hand, shouting orders. The chaos swelled. But it wasn't the fire that stopped her breath. It was the shadow slipping away from the blaze. A figure cloaked in dark silk. Moving swiftly. Purposefully. Not away from danger. Toward something else. She turned, following without hesitation. Through side halls, through the prayer corridor, toward the prince's chambers. She found the figure just as they reached his door. And called out, "Stop." The intruder froze. Turned. And for the first time, Safiye saw her face. Isen. Her sister. The one her father had once tried to trade. Only now, Ison wasn't weeping or begging. She was holding a blade. And her eyes held no sorrow, only rage. "What are you doing?" Safiye whispered. "I came to finish what he started," Ison said. "I was the offering. You were the replacement. He broke us both." "I'm not your enemy," Safiye said. "You were supposed to protect me," Ison snapped. "But you saved yourself." The prince's door opened then. He stood barefoot, half-dressed, eyes wide. And Ison stepped forward. But Safiye moved first. She didn't scream. Didn't strike. She stepped between them. The blade touched her skin. And Ison crumbled. Dropped the knife. Fell to her knees. Safiye knelt too. Held her. Held all that fury. All that grief. And behind them, the fire kept rising. Not just in the palace. But in the truth they could no longer bury. The fire burned long into the morning. By the time it died, half the harem wing was gone, its silks turned to ash, its secrets rising like ghosts. Safiye stood outside as the sky bled gray. Her hands were streaked with soot. Ison slept under guard, wrapped in a blanket, whispering things no one understood. Prince Kemal found her at sunrise. Not with questions, not with blame. But with silence. They watched what remained of the palace together. "She didn't mean to kill me," he said quietly. "She meant to be seen," Safiye replied. He nodded. Later that day, the council convened. Some called for exile. Others for execution. But Safiye stood before them, straight, sharp, and scarred. "If you silence her," she said, "you prove her right. That our voices only matter when spoken by men." The room fell still. Then one of the elder viziers, who had once ignored her entirely, murmured, "And what do you propose?" Safiye didn't hesitate. Let her work in the garden. Let her learn the soil and silence. Let her heal, not disappear. It was not mercy. It was a beginning. Ison was spared. The fire was ruled an accident. But everyone knew the truth had scorched more than stone. And that night, in the quiet after grief, Kemal returned to Safiye's room, not as a prince, but as a man who no longer needed to be silent. And she, as a woman who no longer needed to be afraid. The sky above Bayhan turned gold that season, as if the sun itself had softened. Ison labored in the garden, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, hands always dirty. She spoke little, but when she did, it was to Safiye. Not about the past. But about seeds. Soil. Which flowers bloomed in shade. Forgiveness came slowly. Not in words. But in the planting. The prince changed too. He no longer held court with distance. No longer walked with guarded eyes. He began asking questions. Listening longer. Smiling, even. And Safiye watched all of it like someone peering into sunlight for the first time. They did not speak of love, not yet. Love had been too bruised, too twisted by force and fate. But there were moments. A hand brushing hers. A shared glance after silence. The sound of her laughter breaking through the quiet garden paths. One night, they sat beneath the almond trees. No guards. No ceremony. And Kemal said, "You were never meant to be mine." Safiye looked at him. "And yet here we are." He nodded. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if we'd met another way?" She smiled. "I used to. But I'm beginning to believe we became who we were meant to be because of the way we met." He reached for her hand. Not to own it. To hold it. And under that tree, with ash still in the soil and light finally in the sky, they sat quietly. Not as a prince and his wife. but as two people learning how to love without chains. Years later, when the court scribes wrote our story into record books, they gave it titles like The Quiet Wife Who Changed the Prince or The Flames of Bayhan. They never asked me what I called it. I called it survival. I called it becoming. Ison now teaches girls how to read. She plants jasmine beside every path, saying the scent helps the soul remember what it was before it was broken. Kemal stepped down from his title 5 winters ago. He now walks through the streets of Bayhan without guards. Without fear. He listens more than he speaks. As for me, I am no longer someone's daughter. I am no longer someone's wife. I am simply Safiye. And if that name is ever forgotten, I'll plant it like a seed in the earth. Because I know now. What grows in silence can still bloom. Even after fire.